his life, and his spirit are very much like a GPS system for our spiritual lives. Some people are going to take his directions and they're going to totally ignore them, and they're going to follow what he described last week as the broad road. And he said, where does the broad road lead to? Where does it lead to? Okay, not, well, hell, but he uses the word destruction. Basically, everything you build, everything you live for, it someday will be considered lost. It will be destroyed, and it will be destruction on the broad road if you choose to just go your own way and travel your own road. But he then also says there will be others that are going to listen to him, and they're going to see what's the narrow road, and that road leads to life, the thing that we are searching for. Then some, at that point, when they hear what the narrow road is and see what the narrow road is, they will hop in their cars and they will start driving using those instructions to get to where Jesus has pointed them. There will be another group of people, though, that are going to sit there and they're going to hear those things and they're going to post them on their wall and they're going to go, those are nice directions, but they're going to sit in their chair and they're never going to put them to action, even though they are aware of what the directions are. These are the two sets of people that Jesus is going to address at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. His first sermon to his first believers is those who are actually going to travel the path with him, and those who are just going to be aware of the path, but never actually do anything with it and never get on the path with him. Now, before we get into his final statements, what I want to do is I'm going to go back and we're just going to kind of review what the path is that he's laid out. Because some of you have been here for some of these messages. It's summertime. Some of you have been here for other ones. I kind of want to walk through and give you a quick review again of this path that Jesus has gone. This is the life I desire for you to live as a follower of mine. Here's what he has made clear over the last 3 months. He made it clear that we are to be different from the world around us. That as Christian believers, it is unacceptable for us to look just like everybody else in the world. We are actually to be different from the world around us. He has made it clear that we are to stand out in this culture, that we are actually to be a light, like a city on a hill, a shining light for all to see. He has made clear that we are to stand out. He has made it clear that our motives are to be pure as followers of his, that we are here for God's glory, not our own. All right? He has made it clear that we are to be humble, and we are to let go of our personal pride and our personal issues, and we are humbly to serve the people around us. He has made it clear that we are to be faithful and solely committed to our spouses. He has made that clear for his followers. He has made it clear that we are to be people of integrity, that our yes means yes and our no means no, that we are to be people of integrity with our words. He has made it clear that we are to love unlike the people of this world in the way they love, that we are to love in such a way that we can actually love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us, that we can love the people who hate us and treat us poorly. We are to love differently than the way this world loves. He has made it clear that we are to be focused on building the kingdom of God rather than our own personal kingdoms. He has made it clear that we are to work on our own lives first before we go around trying to tell everybody else how to fix their lives. He has made it clear that we are to be people of prayer and that we are to find peace in the power of God rather than in our own personal power. And he has made it clear that finally we are to be discerning, evaluating if our path, if the leaders we follow, and even our own faith journey are authentic. That is a path that Jesus has laid out. That is a path that Jesus wants you on as a follower of his. Today, he's going to close out asking you this question, though. What will you do with that? You're aware of it. You know it. What will you do with that? And here's what he says in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. He wraps up his whole message, Sermon on the Mount. It's 3 chapters in the Bible. This is the last paragraph, and here's what he says. A lot of you have probably heard this before. He says, anyone who listens to my teachings and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rains come in, and then torrents and floodwaters rise, and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and the floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. Okay? So at the end of his entire sermon, he brings this last point in, and he talks about the foundation that you have built your life on, you've built your house on, and what you have built it on. He describes one as bedrock, and bedrock means it was built on the instructions God has given you. The other one is being built on sand, and he goes, and that's foolish because that's a building without Jesus' instructions, and at some point it's going to collapse. Those of us in Oklahoma, we know this well. I didn't know this as well up north. Foundations mean a lot, do they not? Okay, how many of you have piers in your house right now? Okay, because of the foundation your house is built on. I remember when we got here, we actually moved into a new house. We're the first ones to live there, and like 2 months into it, we have like cracks in the ceiling and stuff, and we're like, what? What is this? And then when we're talking to people, and they're like, well, it's the clay down here that kind of pulls your foundation apart and it pulls your roof apart. And they're like, it takes a few months for everything to settle, or the first couple of years for things to settle. And then once all the cracks happen, then you can go fix them all. And I'm like, I bought a new house. I don't want cracks all over my house. You know what I mean? And there's places down here like in Jinx and stuff that are actually built on more sandy areas. And it's a mess on those houses because foundations are very important with what you build your house on. If you don't have a good, solid foundation, you will have a lot of problems. In the worst cases, you will have houses that collapse that are very dangerous to actually be living in. And that's how he kind of concludes this message. And here's what I want to touch on briefly today is this. There are three very important things to notice in this last scripture that I want to point out that you need to understand as believers of Jesus Christ. And I want to cover those this morning, and here's what they are. The first thing is this. When you read this account, the houses look the same. When you read the account, he just talks about two houses. There's no difference. He doesn't differentiate between them. He just goes, there's two houses that have been built on different things, but the houses look the same. You see, in good times, it's very hard to see the difference between those who are following Jesus and those who only know what it means to follow Jesus. In good times, it's very hard to tell the difference between those following Jesus and those who only have the knowledge of who Jesus is. For those following Jesus and those who only have an intellectual understanding of Jesus, between those who are actually in their car driving with the instructions and following the GPS to where Jesus leads, versus those that are sitting at home in their chairs with his instructions on the wall going, look how pretty that is. From the outside, that is very hard to see. You see, on good days, those two groups of people, they look the same. Their lives don't look radically different. Their lives, if you just look from the outside looking in, you would go, I can't really see a whole lot of difference there. On the good days, they talk the same. The words they say, the expressions they use, the advice they give, it all looks the same. And on good days, the way they act looks pretty much the same. On the good days, you can't tell the houses are different between the two people. Those houses look very similar. Which brings us to the second point, which is this. The storms they go through look the same as well. In this text, it doesn't say one storm is worse than the other. It basically says the storms of life will come is what he's referencing. And if you have lived for any amount of time in your life as an adult, you've either faced storms or you're going to real quick. How many of you have faced the storms of life that you would describe, yeah, I've been through them? Okay? Everybody's got their hands up. You go through storms in life. Here's what you need to understand, and this isn't always preached to everybody. Jesus does not promise you won't go through storms because you're a follower of his and you're on the narrow road with him. He doesn't say, I'm going to protect you from storms that these people don't go through. He makes it very clear you're both going to go through storms. Everybody's going to go through storms because we live in a broken world. We live in a world tainted with sin, and we will all be affected by it, and we will all go through the storms of life. Those storms might look different for all of us, though. Some of you, those storms will be dealing with a difficult or broken relationship. And maybe your marriage is falling apart and you're having to deal with that storm in your life. Maybe it's a financial crisis that you've had to suffer through and you went through that storm in your life. Maybe it's legal issues that you've had to deal with in your life and that was the storm of your life, or an unpleasant or painful health issue that you've had to go through in your life, and you know that was the storm that you had to travel through. Maybe it was the death of someone you loved. And that was a storm you had to go through. Maybe it was dealing with a rebellious or a foolish child. And that was another storm that you had to weather. Maybe it was facing something that brought you public disgrace. Maybe it was you got laid off from work. Or maybe it was dealing with conflict in a work situation or a church situation. or a family situation that you did not enjoy. But at the end of the day, we all will go through storms in this life, and Jesus never promises that he will take those away from you and that you will have a happy-go-lucky life where you're in the sun all the time. You will go through the storms of this life, whether you are following Jesus or whether you are not following Jesus. The storms of life will come. You can't avoid them. Which then brings us to the third thing I want you to notice in this passage, and it's this. The outcome after the storm is drastically different. Okay? The houses look the same. The storms look the same. The outcome after the storm is a whole different case, and they are drastically different outcomes. One of the people that has been building their life on the sand, it says basically what will happen is the house they've built, the life that they have built, will fall into ruin after the storm, and they will have to rebuild. The other people, though, that have built on bedrock, on Jesus, is what it says here, is that those people at the end of the storm will still be standing strong, and they will still be able to add on to what they've already started to build. And instead of restarting from scratch, they will just continue to walk forward, and they will continue to add on to their house because their house will never collapse. You see, in the good times, you better make sure you are building your life on a solid foundation. Here's where we all get hung up a lot. We think in the good times are the times that we can put God over to the side and we can do our own thing and build our house the way we want to. And Jesus makes it very clear here, in the good times is when you better be laying the proper, solid foundation so that when the storms come, your house, your life will withstand them. All right, and a lot of times we get that mixed up, and we go, when the storms come and the torrents come and the high waters come and it erases everything, then we go, okay, now I got to fix it and I got to rebuild. And then the good times come again and we go, yeah, well, Jesus, I'll put you over there and I'll still build on the foundation I want to build on. And the next storm comes and everything collapses again, and you go, why am I never progressing in my life? Why do things never get better? And my theory to you would be this, is because you're constantly building on sand. You're constantly building on your understanding of what you desire rather than what Jesus would have you do. So in the good times, make sure that you are building your house on the bedrock. Make sure you're building your house on a solid foundation that was laid for us by Jesus Christ. He goes, here's how I would have you live. Because while you can get away with pretending everything is great when the weather is wonderful, when the storms in life come, it will expose if you have been a foolish builder or a wise builder. And you can fool people for a time. You can make it look like everything is great, but when the storms come, it will expose how you have built your life, how you have built your house. Jesus, the creator of the universe, has given us the instructions on how to build a life that leads to eternity, on how to build a life that will stand against every storm that we will ever face. The only question left for us to ask and to answer in our own lives is this: what will we do with those instructions? And there are three options, and we've kind of covered them over the last 3 months, but here they are one more time. Jesus goes, here's the directions that get the point where you want to get to. Some people, and it's probably not describing you because you're in church today, some people will totally ignore it and go, I want nothing to do with it, and I don't want to hear it, and I want to go wherever I want to go. Some people are going to take those instructions, and in all seriousness, this is a good illustration. You will print out on Google Maps what that directions look like in the map, and you will frame it in a picture frame, and you will stick it on your wall. And when people come to your house, and when you're around people, you will point them to that picture and go, look at those beautiful directions. And here's the thing. Those people can actually even lead people to Jesus Christ in the right path, even though they're not traveling it themselves, because they can show people to the map. And they can still accomplish things for the kingdom, even though they might not even be in it themselves. But they like having that picture framed on the wall going, look, I know where Jesus wants me to be. But yet they just ignore them, and they go, you know what? It's just a nice picture frame. It's not something I'm actually going to follow. The third group of people is this. It's those that follow it. It's those who type in to their GPS, here's where Jesus wants me to go, and we go, when the voice speaks, follow. When the voice says, I go to this road and hang a right, I get in my car and I get on that road, and when I get to that road, I hang a right. And when I get off that road and the GPS says, rerouting, get back to where you need to be, we respond and we go, absolutely, I need to get back onto that path. That's the person God desires for us to be. That's the person that Jesus desires for us to be. So this morning, at the end of this message and after the 3 months of going through this, my encouragement to you is this: build your life on the foundation that will endure every storm of life that you ever face, and that foundation is Jesus Christ. I have never talked to a person who has regretted it, and I've talked to a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians. I have never had this conversation since becoming a believer. You know what? I was following Jesus, and I really wish I hadn't. I've never had that conversation. I've had this: I went to a church and I wish I hadn't gone there. Or I was following these people and I wish I hadn't followed them. But I've never had a conversation with someone that went, I was following Jesus and I really wish I hadn't. I've never had that conversation. I have had this conversation a million times. I wish I was following him. I've faced these storms in life, and I wish I would have been following Jesus rather than just following a church or just following an individual or just following my own lead or my own thinking or my own instructions. I wish I had been following Jesus, because it would have saved me a whole lot of heartache and pain that I'm going through right now. I've had that conversation more times than I can count with people expressing that to me. I've never had anyone regret following Jesus. So this morning, my last plea to you would be this: be wise builders. Don't be foolish ones. Jesus has laid out the instructions. He has laid out the map. He has laid out how you find eternity, how you find purpose in life. And now he has said, I give you free will. You make the choice. Either follow me or follow your own way. One leads to destruction. One leads to a mighty crash. One leads to eternal life. One leads to having satisfaction and purpose and being fulfilled in your life. You make the choice. I hope you choose wisdom. Would you pray with me?